Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 1, Episode 18, entitled Duet. This episode aired June 13th, 1993. Before we start on this episode, anything from the last podcast you'd like to talk about?
No, I think the last one was perfect.
I'm going to go with perfect. Just because it's difficult to edit, and this is a very time-consuming process, and I haven't listened to the entire thing. I've listened to about 20 minutes of it so far. I would like to give a content warning here, as this episode includes descriptions of violent acts. It's fiction for sure, but it's still a bit harsh, as it has parallels to historic events in the real world, and I just want to warn people that this is a much tougher episode than normal for Deep Space Nine.
Yes.
So we open with an outside shot of the station and a little hint of the theme song before we drop into ops. Kira and Dax are talking about childhood pranks that they used to play. They're also saying a bunch of science stuff, which I initially wrote down just in case it was important, but it didn't turn out to be. So it was just kind of a backdrop, like people just chatting with each other at work.
Script filler.
Kira says, "We never cared what we did as long as it annoyed the grown-ups. And Dax was a champion window breaker, a dark knight with a few rocks." She says, "I was deadly." I mean, that's not nice. I'm sorry to hear that.
Plus, Kira, by the age of 12, was killing Cardassians, so she must have been quite young.
So she wasn't paying attention to rock throwing at that point, for Windows anyway. Kira's finding the story amusing, and she wonders which version of herself Dax is talking about. But before she can answer, they're being hailed by an incoming freighter. They stick in those little things just to tantalize us with hopes of a bigger story that never comes.
Yes.
Anyway, they open a channel, and a lizardy alien person that looks a little like one of the characters from Babylon 5, which I believe was airing at the exact same time, appears on the screen. Kira introduces herself, and the alien lizard dude says the Koberian freighter Rak Munis is requesting permission to dock. Kira clears them for docking port 6 just as Sisko enters from his office. The lizard dude says they have a passenger on board requiring medical assistance. He has a condition called Kala Nora, and he doesn't have his medication. This makes Kira look up suddenly.
Yep.
Sisko says to beam the passenger directly to their infirmary. Dax then warns Bashir that a patient is coming his way, and the doc says he doesn't even know what Kalanora is, but he'll check the computer. We see that Kira has a faraway look on her face, but then she kind of shakes it off and asks Sisko if she can go down to the infirmary and meet the patient. The only cases of that condition that she knows of were the result of a mining accident at a forced labor camp that she helped liberate. The survivors of Gallitep have always been a symbol to Bajorans of strength and courage. And Sisko says, "Well, take as much time as you want." I'll say one thing about Kira. Her posture is impeccable. I wish I could stand up that straight. I mean, it's impressive.
Yeah. I'll add here, the alien makeup was very good for the freighter captain. They've so far done that pretty consistently. They put some effort into the makeup of the aliens that appear on screen for like 15 seconds.
Yeah, because we do never see this guy again.
Yeah.
So Kira enters the infirmary and finds Bashir tending to a Cardassian, which is not exactly what Kira was expecting. When she sees the guy, she immediately calls Odo asking for security. The Cardassian looks at her with just a faint smile. This is a new Cardassian that we haven't seen before, but he has a really large head. That's my main note here. Anyway, from here we cue the theme song. After the theme, Bashir asks what's wrong, and when Kira says the patient is a criminal, the Cardassian very slowly gets up and runs away. I mean, run is a stretch. He kind of lumbers out onto the promenade, and he's stopped immediately by a Bajoran security officer. And Odo arrives and says, "Good afternoon. I assume this is the problem," as Kira and Bashir walk out of the infirmary.
That's a very poor attempt at making a run for it.
I know.
A sort of lumbering stumble.
Everything is always so slow moving on this show. Like that ridiculous thing in the last episode where the guy was going to stab Sisko in the neck with a needle, but somehow there was time for Miles to turn his head and see it and yell at Sisko, and then Sisko to turn his head and see it and somehow fight it off.
Well, my theory on that is it was a soap opera. All those people were acting parts in an alien soap opera. So it made sense for it to be slow. You want to play up the drama.
So Kira says to lock the dude up. Bashir is complaining that he needs medical care, and Kira says you can give it to him in his cell. The Cardassian is saying, "This is outrageous. I haven't done anything." Odo wonders then why he was running, which I put in double quotes. He says, "He was trying to get away from this Bajoran fanatic. Look at the hate in her eyes. She'd like to kill me." When Odo asks him why, the guy says, "Well, it's obvious, because I'm a Cardassian." And Kira says, "Not just any Cardassian. This is a war criminal." Odo nods for the security guy to take him away. And by the way, this new Cardassian, he's played by Harris Yulin, another very familiar character actor under all that makeup. It was a little hard to tell. I had to look it up. I couldn't quite recognize him.
I recognized him immediately because he was in Scarface. He had a small role which ended badly for the character.
Oh. In Odo's office, we learn the Cardassian's name is Eamon Marritza. We also learn that he's not on the official list of Cardassians wanted for war crimes. Odo says he's not on any list that he's seen, and he has seen them all. Kira doesn't care if he's listed or not, of course, but the guy showed up on a Federation ship seeking medical attention, and we've now thrown him in a cell. So Sisko says he'd better be on some list. Kira goes into her indignant tone. What I've done may not be legal, but it's right. The only way he could have contracted this condition is if he were working at that labor camp called Gallitep. Sisko wonders how he could be a war criminal just for being there, which is really not a great question to ask considering what she says next. She starts to describe about what she saw there. Bajoran bodies, starved, brutalized. Cardassian policy was humiliation, rape, beatings, old people buried alive because they couldn't work fast enough. And then she turns away. Odo and Sisko look at each other like, okay, maybe we should listen.
Kira is very upset by this whole thing. I think this is the most emotional that we've actually seen her.
Certainly since the Kai died.
But this seems to be a different kind of emotion, if that makes sense. The Kai was just grief, and this seems more horror, if you like.
Yeah.
It seems more personal, I think.
Yes. Sisko heads into the cell area to talk to the guy, calling him our guest. There appears to be someone just passed out in one of the other cells, but you don't really get a good look at him yet. Sisko asks Marritza how he feels, and he says better. Sisko introduces himself, and the Cardassian says, oh, finally, the Federation to the rescue. And Sisko asks how he contracted Kalanora, but the Cardassian says he doesn't have that. He has something else. It's called Patrick syndrome. And he says the conditions are similar, and the medications are the same. Oh, Sisko says, so you didn't serve at the Gallitep labor camp. I'm not sure that's a very good interrogation technique. Oh, so you're innocent. Sure. Marritza says he's never even been to Bajor. He was a military file clerk, but he can't quite look Sisko in the eye, which seems suspicious. He says he lives on Cora 2 now, where he boarded a freighter, and unfortunately, the freighter brought him here. The whole story is suspicious. Why would you randomly board a freighter?
Yes. He didn't say where he was going, what the purpose of it was.
Right.
Sisko here is just amazing. You notice the way earlier on, he just turns off emotion. When he very calmly says he's going to go and see the prisoner,
yeah,
he was so flat. I was really impressed with that.
From that cell behind Sisko, the guy who appeared to be passed out seems to wake up, and it's an older, disheveled Bajoran dude, and he starts shouting that he doesn't want to be in a jail with a Cardassian.
Seems a little hostile towards Cardassians.
Yeah, Sisko slowly turns to him as he keeps yelling for Odo. The Cardassian kind of quietly says, I put myself in your hands, Commander. I do not like this guy. He's freaking me out already. I don't know if it's the hair, but he's creepy. It's always somebody's hair. In these episodes, it's just the hair is insane. Now we go to Sisko's office, and Bashir confirms that Marritza has Kalanora, not Patrick syndrome. And after cross-checking all medical records, there's just no other way for him to have gotten this condition except from the Gallitep labor camp.
So unquestionably, he was there.
For once, Bashir is being useful.
He can look at the computer.
You're right. Sisko is annoyed. He doesn't need this problem. Just then, Kira calls, saying the Minister of Bajor is calling, and Sisko dismisses Bashir and answers the call from Minister Kaval. Minister Kaval thanks him for the special service to Bajor that he performed today by holding a certain Cardassian.
Wow, the minister hears things pretty quickly. Clearly, Kira's spies are everywhere.
Oh man, we go back a couple episodes.
Yes.
Sisko isn't sure that he has grounds to hold him, but Kaval says Major Kira has accepted full responsibility, so the burden is off your shoulders. Sisko doesn't really see it that way, but the minister says the guy was at Gallitep, and Bajor wants him, and we will have him. Is that clear? And then he hangs up, leaving Sisko to kind of sigh at another pain-in-the-butt problem on this station.
Oh yeah, the minister really lays down the law to Sisko there. Plus, I like how Sisko takes initially a very less compliant attitude and then accepts the orders. I think this is showing Sisko knows which battles to fight and when to fight them. And this is one that, yeah, you really don't want to fight this one with the minister in your position.
It's interesting the way you look at Sisko. I imagine it's because you have 7 seasons of Sisko to think about and to fall back on. Yeah. Whereas I look at it as he doesn't seem very engaged in this episode. He just seems very understated.
Really?
So I guess I'm looking at him differently because I don't have the years of experience with him. I just have, these 17 episodes that we've watched.
Yes, it's difficult to avoid what I know about the character and reading that into the earlier episodes.
Sure, right. Sisko comes down the winding staircase in Quarks to join Kira, who is sitting at a table. He tells her he wants Odo to handle the investigation into Marritza, even though Minister Kaval put her in charge. Kira thinks the Federation has no right to tell the Bajorans how to deal with their criminals. Sisko says until we determine if he really is a criminal, he's just a traveler under suspicion. But if he is a criminal, then the Bajorans are welcome to him. His main concern, though, is that he thinks Kira is too close to be objective.
This is probably the very definition of a difficult conversation.
Absolutely.
I mean, in some ways, it makes sense to give Odo responsibility because she is very close to it.
Kira sighs, saying this isn't some personal vendetta on her part. She may not be objective, but she promises to conduct herself according to her job as first officer. He never quite trusts her enough, which is pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Then she appeals to him a little differently, saying she's asking as a friend to be allowed to conduct the investigation. She feels she owes it to the victims, to the ones who moved too slowly and then never moved again. For all the Bajorans who can't ask, let a Bajoran do this. The difference between this Kira and early episode Kira is that she's relatively calm here and her plea is impassioned but rational.
Yeah.
And Sisko gives in and kind of calls Odo at that point to let him know that Major Kira will be in charge of the investigation. And she thanks him. That was quite a scene.
Well, that's also a very pivotal scene because you've mentioned about how he doesn't quite trust her. And she does this appeal to him.
Yeah.
And he relents. I think that was a very smart, calculated position for Sisko. I mean, we saw where he was coming from and we saw where he ended up, which is letting her take charge of it.
Right.
Do you think she demonstrated in this that she was dispassionate enough? It would be such an almost impossible task to be dispassionate about something like this.
I'm not sure that she showed that she was dispassionate. She maybe showed that she was being rational.
I think that's a better term, yeah.
But I think her argument was this is a crime committed against Bajorans, and really Bajorans are the ones who should be looking into it. I think he came into it thinking the opposite, that, Bajoran could never be objective enough to actually do an investigation. But because she was being pretty rational and the words that she said, I think were moving. I don't think he was certain because he even kind of made a face like, oh, okay, I'm not so sure this is the right thing, but I'm going to do this for you.
Right. Now, there is also a question here, I would say, of if he has this condition and he's a Cardassian, he definitely would have been at the camp. Therefore, surely the question really comes down to who he is rather than the guilt.
Yeah, well, because either way, he's a Cardassian who is at this labor camp.
Yeah.
How do you just not say he's guilty regardless of who he was or what he did there?
Right.
There's a few times during this episode that I don't think this is a very good look on the Federation, the way they're dealing with this.
Right.
So Kira enters security just as Odo is letting the drunk Bajoran out, and Odo tells the guy to stay out of trouble for at least a few days, and the guy says he'll do his best. On his way out, he says, let me know when you hang the Cardassian. Nice, but, I mean, it's hard to blame the Bajorans after this episode in particular.
Right.
Odo has been looking into Marritza's background, and so far he's found that he did board the freighter at Cora 2, where he has been a military academy instructor for the past 5 years. He says he'll keep looking as she heads into the cell area to talk to Marritza.
This is very Judgment in Nuremberg.
This episode is so dense. There's just so much to say. I mean, I felt like we could shorten a lot of these things, but you gotta hear it. There's some tough stuff that goes on, and even this next part in particular, there's just so much that they talk about, and the dialogue is just so tense and intense that, I don't know, it's just, there's a lot of words, but
yes.
This is a major episode.
Oh, agreed.
So in his cell, the Cardassian dude is eating something called semel stew, and he says it could use a little yamok sauce. And where are Nog and Jake with the yamok sauce? I mean, they should have saved a couple bottles to sell to tourists. Make a couple of bars of Latinum here and there.
I have the feeling they don't get a lot of Cardassian tourists on Deep Space Nine.
I suppose not. Kira has a few questions to ask, and he wonders what happens if he refuses to answer. Kira says it's just her job. Oh, persecuting Cardassians goes far beyond your job. It's your passion. I mean, this guy sucks.
Yes.
She says, you claim you were never at Gallitep, and that your illness is not Kalanora. He says he missed the honor of being at Gallitep, and it's true, he doesn't have that disease. No, it's false, Kira says. Our doctor has diagnosed you with it, which means you were at the labor camp. She says, if your lies are going to be this transparent, the interrogation will be short. So he says, well, in that case, I'll try to make my lies more opaque. I mean, this guy he's guilty of something. That was my verdict at this point in the episode, not knowing what was coming.
He seems to use language in very much the same way as Garrick does.
She asks for his rank and duties at Gallitep, but he says, you don't want to know. You'll be disappointed because I was just a filing clerk. He wanted to avoid military service altogether, and he had the good fortune to be placed in the filing office on Gallitep, where in 14 years of service he never misplaced or lost a record, and he received numerous commendations from Gul Darhe'el. He sarcastically says he awaits execution and holds his napkin up over his face. She says, well, I hope we don't keep you waiting long, which is a good comeback.
Oh, yeah.
Then she asks the question I would have asked in the beginning. How does a filing clerk become an instructor at a military academy? He says he teaches filing, and she can verify that if she wants. She asks if he admits to working under Gul Darhe'el, and he says, well, we all did. So you witnessed the atrocities, she asks. What atrocities, he says. Oh, that's going to make her mad, and it does.
Oh, yeah.
He only vaguely recalls hearing a scream from time to time. She says, you expect me to believe that you knew nothing of the murders or the tortures. You never saw the bodies. Well, of course I saw bodies, he says. People died all the time, in mining accidents, illnesses, feuds among the workers. There were fights over food, blankets, women. The conditions were harsh. It was a labor camp. Kira says she helped liberate that camp, and she saw how they died. He kind of shrugs her off. You saw what we wanted you to see. Who do you think started the rumors about brutality at Gallitep? It was Gul Darhe'el himself. Now there was a leader, brilliant, extraordinary man. He knew that to rule by fear was to rule completely. Why bother with actual mass murders when just the reports of such incidents would have the same effect? It kept you Bajorans thinking of yourselves as victims, to keep you afraid and helpless. Oh, good. So his claim here is that it never happened. That's
revisionist history. It's the best kind of history.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting take that he went with that approach.
Yeah.
Especially with Kira, who'd actually been there and seen it.
Well, and she reacts to that. She says, we weren't so helpless. We got rid of you. But Marritza says it was a political decision to leave. He knows an awful lot for a filing clerk.
Yeah.
He says he's done reminiscing and wants to be let out. She's like, that isn't going to happen. And he says, well, that's because it's not the truth you're interested in. It's vengeance. Then he creepily smiles at her and we go into an ad break. This guy is scary.
Oh, yeah. And I like the parallel to Gul Dukat, because remember Gul Dukat earlier said they should never have left Bajor. And this guy is sort of parroting something like that of, oh, well, the decision to leave was just political. We never actually lost.
Right. Now Sisko is in his office talking to Gul Dukat on the communicator.
FaceTiming.
Right. So he's saying he thought the Federation guaranteed the safe and unrestricted passage of all travelers through Deep Space Nine, and he wonders how Sisko can explain the detention of a Cardassian citizen. And Sisko says he came here seeking medical attention, which we're providing. All we're trying to do is verify his identity. That's a very simple matter that you could assist us with. But Gul Dukat thinks he doesn't really need their assistance. If the guy says his name is Marritza, then that's who he is. So helpful.
Yeah, Dukat immediately just plays hardball with the Federation. You can see there's definitely a sort of a contempt for Federation policy, and for Sisko, personally.
Yeah, and then he also is the kind of jerk that he normally is, where he says, are you suggesting you don't trust him simply because he's Cardassian? And Sisko doesn't trust him because he's already lied about being a Gallitep.
Yeah.
Gul Dukat wonders if he's being charged with lying, which, of course, that would put a lot of the Ferengi and the Cardassians in jail.
Yeah, well, all the Ferengi for a start.
Yeah.
Fake news.
Sisko says nobody's been charged with anything yet. Then let him go, Dukat says. Sisko would like nothing better, but first he needs to know who he would be letting go. Gul Dukat understands the awkward position that Sisko is in, but this obsession the Bajorans have with alleged Cardassian improprieties is really quite distasteful. And Sisko says the Bajorans probably found the occupation quite distasteful.
Ouch. Good burn, Sisko. I like that.
So the Cardassian stance is that none of this happened and the Federation just keeps pretending like it's true. This doesn't feel great.
Well, I think they touched on earlier that the Cardassians initially claimed that they were there to help the Bajorans.
Dukat reminds Sisko that neither of them are Bajoran, and he'd hate for this to cause a conflict between the Federation and Cardassia. Sisko says he'd hate for that to happen too, and he just needs Dukat's help, but Dukat is pretty much refusing. This guy is so gross. And by the way, he's great at being gross. I mean, I believe this character exists. That's how good he is at it.
Oh, yeah.
He says, if any of the Bajoran hate mongers get their hands on him, I'll hold you personally responsible. And then he hangs up.
Once again, threatening Sisko.
You know, the Federation's alliance with the Cardassians, it's questionable at best. I don't have a ton of info. We're however many episodes in, 18 episodes in, and we haven't covered this really very much. We've hinted at it. We've talked a little bit about it. We really only have what Kira says.
Yeah.
But I don't feel great about the Federation stance here.
Well, we learn more of it in a few years when Voyager starts.
Right. On the second floor of the promenade, Kira is standing straight up as usual, posture perfect, when Dax comes up asking what she's looking for. Answers, Kira says, kind of half smiling. She's trying to reconcile what Marritza said about her wanting vengeance more than the truth. She just wants to see him punished. And Dax asks even if he really was just a file clerk, but Kira doesn't want him to just be a file clerk. She wants him to be something worse. But either way, everyone at Gallitep was guilty. His punishment would let Bajor feel some satisfaction. Dax says, it sounds like you're trying to convince yourself it's okay. You know, if you punish him without reason, it won't mean anything. People are always so convinced they have to talk Kira into doing the right thing. It's tiresome. It gets old.
I have to agree with Rom that it's the Federation do-gooders.
Yeah, there is a lot of preaching they do at others, for sure, of how to do the right thing and how to be righteous.
Oh, gosh, there's always a lot of self-righteousness going on with the Federation.
It comes off a little sanctimonious sometimes. Dax says you already know that vengeance isn't enough, and she walks away, leaving Kira looking out the window by herself.
I don't know. I think the dead Bajorans might disagree with Dax on that one.
I don't know either. I mean, punishing him without reason is a funny phrase, because Kira's right. Everyone there was guilty, and the symbol of punishing him, regardless of who he is, could have an impact. Granted, maybe a negative one, but an impact nonetheless.
But the argument would be if you were there, if you were working in any capacity, you were supporting basically the regime and the camp.
Yeah. You weren't doing anything to stop it.
Yeah.
In Ops, Miles is telling someone, I think it's Anara from the episode The Forsaken, to reroute the signal enhancement module to the main sensor array. We're endlessly rerouting things. That's like the main technical thing we do in Star Trek.
I worry every time that woman has a panel open that she's going to be a red shirt.
Yeah, because she's been in 2 episodes now. She's had lines in both, so... Yeah. But I don't know, what happened to Primin? He was only in 2 episodes, and then he disappeared. Nobody killed him.
He fell out of an airlock that he was inspecting.
I miss Frowny Face.
Odo doesn't.
Anyway, as this is going on, Odo and Sisko are walking through Ops together. Odo has checked the Bajoran archives, and Marritza is indeed on record as being a filing clerk at Gallitep. Here I started wondering, though, was that everyone's cover story who worked there? You know, when they were asked, oh no, I was Marritza, the filing clerk. I had nothing to do with torturing Bajorans.
Oh, some of them were just cooks.
Yeah, they probably were cooks. Also, Odo verified that Marritza was teaching filing at the military academy. Just how much is there to teach about filing? Isn't that something that, like, when you get a new job, somebody goes over the filing with you on your first day and then that's it? This whole story is so shady, which I guess is the point.
Well, I have a theory here as well.
Yeah.
This might actually be a pointer to historical fact, because the Nazis in Second World War loved documenting everything. They had ridiculous levels of documents, details, files, all sorts of things. There was almost an obsession with it. I think that might be a deliberate parallel here. This might be overanalysis, but that's what I think's going on.
They walk down the stairs to where Kira is working, and Sisko asks how many images they got from the Bajoran archives. Kira says they could only find 1. The Cardassians destroyed nearly all of the records of the occupation, of course. So Sisko asks what Kira thinks should be done if the image shows that Marritza really was a filing clerk. She says, well, I suppose you'll let him go. And he says, I'm glad we understand each other. And I go back to, this is not a good look on the Federation. Maybe he was a filing clerk, but he was still there and part of the occupation. Right. I don't get it.
Yeah, that's very odd. Haven't they studied any history?
Ugh.
Well, certainly haven't they studied any human history.
The thing I find funny here is we had Rumpelstiltskin on the station a few weeks ago, and now we have this story? It's like total whiplash.
Well, that's what makes season 1 so odd.
Yeah.
We have some great episodes, including this one, and then you have the Rumpelstiltskin episode.
Right. And a goofy episode doesn't have to be a terrible episode, but that one was not great.
No, Move Along Home was a goofy episode, and I loved it.
Right. So they pull the image up on the view screen, and The funny thing in this is that they're relying on the caption in the picture, which is awfully flimsy evidence, but they're looking at the caption to see who each person is in the photo. And they zoom in on the image to see the Cardassian named Marritza, but the image is really blurry and you can't really tell it's the same person. And Dax says she's running an image enhancement sequence. I mean, come on, most TV shows just say enhance and everything is enhanced. Isn't this the future?
Everybody marked on that photo, by the way, has their occupation listed as a cook.
Oh my gosh, that would have been funny. It's funny how Star Trek in the 90s really missed out on how much video and, highly detailed images would be a part of the near future.
And it wasn't that far in the future either.
No. Everything suddenly clears up in the image and the face does not appear to be the same guy. And now I was getting really uncomfortable when watching this, like, he's not the file clerk. I mean, This is such a serious subject matter. It was freaking me out the whole time. So Sisko says, if that's Marritza, then who do we have in the security cell? And he asks to enhance the other Cardassians in the picture as the dramatic music swells. They do find him in the picture in another spot, and the caption says, it's Gul Darhe'el. That is not good.
The man himself, the commandant of the camp.
Back in security, Marritza, or whoever this guy is, says, you've come back to learn the secret of my filing system. And Kira asks if he killed the real Marritza and took his place. She says, well, you'll pay for that death and all the other ones you're responsible for. He says, well, I'm not sure I can pay for all of them, as you can only execute me once. That's my only regret, she says, but I'll settle for Bajor finally having the satisfaction of punishing the Butcher of Gallitep. He asks if she figured it out all by herself or if she had help from her Federation masters.
Ooh.
Then he kind of reclines on his cot. He doesn't have a lot to work with because he's really trapped in a small space. But he is just scaring the crap out of me in every scene. The guest actors are just killing it on this show.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think that's why you want somebody with some really good acting chops, because literally you're just doing a talking head scene and he's in a cell. So you have to have someone who can deliver these lines in a very convincing and a very strong way.
Yeah. Someone who can, I guess, also understand the depth of what is going on.
Right.
So Kira says, I'll let you wonder about that. It'll keep you busy while we're waiting for the provisional government. Drink to prepare your war crimes tribunal.
We haven't had provisional government in so long.
I know. He wonders how there can be war crimes when there has been no war. He says, I can understand your wish that there had been a war, your need to indulge some pathetic fantasy about brave Bajoran soldiers marching to an honorable defeat. He says, you and I both know there was no war, no glory. Bajor didn't resist. It surrendered. And then he does that creepy smile again. This is, I don't know how else to describe it, but this is a lot. It is a lot to deal with.
Yeah, it's amazing how well he's portraying like a complete fanatic.
Yeah.
He believes the propaganda. Maybe he even created the propaganda at this point. But he's sticking to his story and how he has the moral high ground and the righteousness of him.
And shockingly, it gets worse. We haven't even got to the worst part.
Yes.
Kira says, we were a peaceful people before you came. We offered no threat to you. We could never understand your brutality. Marritza says, well, we can't have that. I don't want any more secrets between us. Anything you don't understand, I'll explain it to you. She says, thanks, but I've heard enough of your lies. What lies? He says. You mean how I hid my true identity from you? Believe me, Major, I yearned to tell you. But I knew how much more satisfaction you would have if you found out for yourself. I think that's the first true thing he said.
Yeah.
Marritza was a magnificent filing clerk, and I, Gul Darhe'el, was a magnificent leader. At Gallitep's height, it was the very model of order and efficiency. And why? For that, you have to look to the top, to me. My word, my every glance was law, and the verdict was always the same. Guilty! You're insane, Kira says incredulously. Oh, no, Major, you can't dismiss me that easily. I did what had to be done, and that's why my men loved me. I would order them to go out and kill Bajoran scum, and they'd do it. They'd murder them and come back covered in blood, but they felt clean. Why? Because they were clean. I mean, this just, we are in a dark hole that we can't get out of. She says, so you admit your atrocities. I admit everything, he shouts. Why not? I was the best at what I did. My accomplishments speak for themselves. Can you say the same? You and that little Shakar resistance cell that you belong to? All you did was annoy Cardassians while I was out exterminating Bajorans. Oi. Make sure and tell that to the tribunal. Oh, I will, the crazy guy says. It won't change anything. Kill me, torture me. It doesn't matter. You've already lost. Of course, that's the trouble. It can't be undone.
Yeah.
And I was going, oh my God, I hope she's recording this because what if he retracts the whole thing later? He goes on to say, you can't undo my accomplishments. The dead will still be dead. And Kira heads out.
I think that's just so telling the way he uses that word as well. My accomplishments.
Yes, it's awful. And I can't believe she didn't lose her cool and just shoot him, but she didn't.
Yeah, this is amazing for Kira as well. I mean, she's basically come face to face with one of the worst war criminals of the occupation. Somebody that obviously from earlier on you saw clearly impacted her. And her emotional state. And she's remaining calm while he's ranting in front of her. Yeah.
And he says, what will you do now, Major? Withhold my medicine? But she doesn't answer. She just leaves. I mean, this is just crazy. I was thinking about how we went from Bashir and Vantika, and his ridiculous overacting in that episode.
I don't know what you mean.
Oh my God. To Rumpelstiltskin, to that crazy story about the monster in the sky that the villagers had to wish away.
Yeah.
To a probe they put in a virtual doghouse. To this. I mean, what just happened? It's like you're not even watching the same show.
Right. I referred to my comment earlier.
This is a lot of work. After the ad break, Kira is hanging out in Odo's office. He comes in with a glass of blue liquid saying, this will help. He says it's some kind of special ale from Quark's private stock. I wouldn't drink that. It does not look good. But she takes a sip.
That was very touching from Odo.
Yeah.
The fact that he could actually understand the impact that this was having on her and actually do that. I thought that was sort of surprisingly almost out of character for Odo.
He does care about her, though.
Yeah.
Although even if you think about what happened in the last episode, where she was taken over by whatever it was, if it was a play or whatever.
Yeah.
And she was trying to use him. He seems to have gotten over that.
Well, she was trying to kill Sisko, so they seem to be getting on. I think you have to do that if you're in the Star Trek universe, because how many episodes have been based around that? Yeah. One person is possessed. Even Miles was possessed.
Yes. She wonders how many others like Darhe'el are still out there unpunished. Quite a few, no doubt, Odo says. She says, you should have heard him. And again, I'm like, were we not recording? Why wouldn't we always be recording what's going on in those cells? Oh, my God. Anyway, she says he bragged about what happened at Gallitep. He's proud of what he did. Odo suggests that she go lie down, but she doesn't want to do that because that's exactly what he'd like, another Bajoran hiding in a corner.
He really knows how to push her buttons, doesn't he?
Yeah. She said he's probably in there laughing right now. When she was in the Resistance, they'd lie awake at night plotting the assassination of men like him. And now I have to stand there and listen to him belittle everything we stood for in the Shakar. Odo is like, maybe you should have avoided discussing your personal history with a creature like that. And she says she didn't. And then the music swells a bit as Odo wonders, well, then how did he know you were with the Shakar? If he'd been in charge of quelling the resistance, maybe, but he was in charge of a forced labor camp. So,
Yeah, he's immediately suspicious that he seems to know something of Kira's background.
Yeah.
I have a theory here as well. Odo is very cognizant of things that are out of place. We've seen that. He's very good at spotting them. He also worked with the Cardassians, so I think he'd have a good understanding of their operational procedures and how they operate.
Right.
So he probably knows exactly what sort of information they would share and what they wouldn't share. And I have the feeling that the Cardassians in an operating environment would be very silo-based. They wouldn't want to let other Cardassians know exactly what they were up to or what they were doing, and they would be very secretive in their operations unless they were forced to share information. So this is something why that became immediately a source of suspicion for Odo, because he knows their procedures and something doesn't fit.
Yeah, that stood out to him immediately. It also made Kira curious at this point, and she stands up to go have another go at Marritza. When she leaves, Odo asks the computer to identify all off-station requests for information about Major Kira within the last 8 months. When Kira enters back into the cell area, Marritza is lying down on his cot. Am I really so fascinating, he asks. And she asks how he knew she was in the Shakar, and he laughs it off, saying the provisional government, drink, should have dragged him away in chains by now. He says you forget the brilliance of Maritza's filing system. He made sure I was provided with info about all of the little terrorist plots. I particularly enjoyed the termination reports. Then he giggles. Very gross.
Yep.
He says life in a forced labor camp can be so isolating. I often felt like I was the only one bearing the burden of cleansing Bajor of its rabble.
Wow.
Kira says, and I'm supposed to believe that you remembered my name from some report you read years ago? At the risk of bruising your vanity even further, I don't remember you at all, which of course makes this even more confusing now that he has said that. But then, maybe to distract her, he says he has some questions for her before they come for him. It looks like she's going to leave, but instead she sits down on a chair and just looks at him. Outside of Odo's office is a small group of people covered in dark robes, their faces obscured. Quark asks who they are, and Odo tells him they're survivors of Gallitep. They're probably waiting for justice. Quark says, Gallitep. Imagine living through the pain and sorrow of that. Then he says, do you think they like to gamble? And this was not the time for comic relief. It wasn't funny. It didn't fit. It's like they were trying to say, oh, haha, we're still at Quark's. Isn't it funny? It wasn't. It didn't. I found it offensive, and it's not even real people.
I look at it slightly differently. I thought it was showing the Ferengi view of the world, which is, oh, yes, there was this horrible thing. There was this, awful camp.
Yeah.
How does it affect my profit? It doesn't. I carry on with my life. You mentioned earlier how very insular they are. And I think that is just reinforcing this Ferengi view of just profit over anything else.
Profit forward.
Right.
So I agree with you because you're looking at it from the perspective of Quark. And Quark might say something like that, yes. But I felt from the point of view of the writing that comic relief at this moment was inappropriate.
Right.
It didn't work for me. It felt like it really fell flat, not because it wasn't what Quark maybe would have done, but just because you came out of this sort of deepest, darkest conversation, and then you just told sort of this goofy joke. And I thought just in terms of the writing, I didn't think it clicked.
Yes, I would agree with that. You could have changed when this sort of joke was made and changed the setting and made it work much better without it appearing to be almost sort of flippant writing.
Right. Yeah. Odo enters medical, asking Bashir for help. There was a request a few months ago from Cora 2 looking for info on Kira. He doesn't know why, but he knows that the name on the request was Marritza. So he asks Bashir if he can have a look at his medical history through his subspace link that he's established. It was a little weird here that Odo told him the first part, as it seems to have nothing to do with what he asked Bashir to do, but it's like we had to get that information out somehow.
Yeah. Plus, clearly HIPAA standards, as I pointed out, are significantly laxer in the future.
That is so true. We seem to be able to share medical details across races and species and all over the place. We don't share anything else, which is funny. Bashir nods as Dax calls Odo saying that Gul Dukat is responding to his subspace transmission, and Odo heads to his office to take the call. Dukat's making a lot of phone calls today.
Yes.
In Odo's office, we see Gul Dukat on the phone again. I do miss working with you, Odo, he's saying. Yuck. I miss our games of Kalevian Montar. And Odo says, we played one game and you cheated, which cracks up Dukat. Same old Odo, like a blunt instrument, which is a pretty good description of Odo.
I thought that seemed very true to form for Gul Dukat. You could see him doing that. I'll play, but I'll cheat.
Well, you set your own rules.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Then he says he regrets that he can't give Odo access to any of the files pertaining to Gul Darhe'el, but I assure you the files would tell you that he's dead. I attended his funeral myself.
Turns out he was a national hero.
Odo wonders then who they're holding in the cell. Some innocent Cardassian, Dukat says, and we want him released. Odo tells him that innocent citizen has admitted that he is Gul Darhe'el. Dukat says, what? He is lying. Well, it's quite a foolish lie, Odo says, as it's likely to get him executed. Dukat is like, that is impossible. Half of Cardassia viewed his body when he died. What about the photograph, Odo wonders. It's a mistake, Dukat says. This is some kind of plot to embarrass the Cardassian Empire. It's possible, Odo says, give me access to your files and maybe I'll find some proof of what you're saying. So Dukat agrees to grant him limited access. And Dukat hangs up.
I think it's interesting how Dukat goes straight to, it's a plot. I think that speaks to the Cardassian mindset more than anything else. Also, it's interesting how Dukat seems to have some trust for Odo and allows him access to the files. I thought that seemed kind of odd, but I guess Dukat would rather see a Cardassian go free and give Odo the files than to give the Bajorans any kind of satisfaction executing someone.
Right. Kira is telling the prisoner that she was 12 when she started fighting, but she heard of some who were even younger than that. Marritza says, yes, get to the real story. How many Cardassians did you personally kill? But Kira didn't keep count. Marritza doubts that and also thinks she killed more than just soldiers because the most effective terrorist weapon is random violence. Kira's had enough of their chat and she starts to leave. Don't leave now, Marritza says. It's just getting good. How many Cardassian civilians did you kill? He shouts after her. She whirls around. Look, she says, I regret a lot of what I had to do, but we had no choice. We were fighting for survival. So were we, Marritza says. We had an empire to protect, and we needed your resources. Everything I did was for the greater good of Cardassia. All that mattered was Cardassia. That's what gave me strength. Nothing justifies genocide, she says. What you call genocide, I call a day's work. Then Odo enters asking for a word with Kira, and they leave together.
Wow.
It's like, there's only so much of this conversation I can take.
This is just crazy, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, there's a couple of things here. I mean, the first one is she says she doesn't keep count. I personally believe that she did, that she knows exactly how many people she's killed. I think that's something that weighs on her.
Could be.
And I think we've seen indications that is something that she lives with.
Well, it's hard to know if those things that she's living with, you know, was it collateral damage where maybe some Bajorans were hurt or innocent people were hurt? You know what I mean? Not so much that, I had to kill Cardassians. I doubt that she had too many bad feelings about that. But I don't know. I don't know enough about her yet.
Yeah, I think in that situation, it would be very hard to avoid collateral damage. But I would also add, how do you class Cardassian civilians during an occupation? Are there any civilians in that situation?
Yeah. After a brief leaf blower break, because California loves a good leaf blower.
Oh, yeah.
Odo tells Kira that he doesn't yet know why, but the man in that cell wanted to be caught, and the music swells into the ad break.
Oh, so definitely something is up.
Yeah. Now we go to Sisko's office, and Odo shows Sisko Gul Darhe'el's death certificate. He died in his sleep 6 years ago. Cause of death was a massive colebric hemorrhage. Kira thinks the Cardassians are trying to trick them into letting Darhe'el go, which seems like a pretty good guess.
Oh yeah, it's the kind of trick I would see the Cardassians play.
For sure. Odo says that the evidence he got from Cardassia shows that Gul Darhe'el never contracted Kalanora syndrome. More evidence from a non-trustworthy Gul Dukat, by the way. When the mining incident occurred on Gallitep, Gul Darhe'el wasn't even on Gallitep. He was getting some big-time award back on Cardassia. Kira is really surprised that they're believing this nonsense.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would expect anything that came out of the Cardassians would be very heavily edited or just completely made up.
Right. Well, there's more, Odo says. In the past 2 weeks, this guy resigned from his position at the military academy, and he put all of his affairs in order, even providing handsomely for his housekeeper. Then he specifically requested passage on a vessel that was destined for DS9. This seems like an unusual request for a Cardassian war criminal unless he wanted to be captured.
Yeah.
Kira says if they have any doubts about who the guy is, they should just go ask him. He'll tell you about what he did. Then Bashir comes in, saying he reviewed Marritza's medical records, and he was indeed under treatment for Kalanora. But 5 years ago, after arriving on Cora 2, he started taking massive doses of dermaterillion plasticine, which is a dermal regenerative agent used after cosmetic alteration. Lots of things going wrong now. And Kira says he changed his face to look like Gul Darhe'el.
So Bashir drops the bombshell.
Yeah. Dramatic music as Kira goes back into the jail cell area.
Kira seems a little deflated as she goes in.
Yeah, she does. She's puzzled by something, and she wants to know how he contracted Kalanora syndrome. He reminds her that the mining accident didn't just affect Bajorans. She says, yeah, but you weren't at Gallitep when the accident happened. Your own progress report says you were on Cardassia. He looks sort of sideways at her and then says, that's ridiculous. The reports are wrong. She asks why he was taking a dermal regenerative. He blusters, and she says, why are you pretending to be Gul Darhe'el? He says, why don't you ask me something intelligent, like, how did I feel when we were withdrawing from Bajor? The answer is, I was furious. The thought of leaving any survivors behind was repulsive to me. While our useless office clerks were packaging their precious files, I ordered my overseers to begin slaughtering the laborers. My plan was to kill every Bajoran in camp. And my one regret was that I wasn't able to accomplish that one goal. He's putting on quite a show now.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
dramatic.
Yes.
So you are Marritza, aren't you? Kira asks. Then he says, you mistake me for that whimpering nothing? You are a stupid Bajoran girl. I'm your nemesis. I'm your nightmare. Nah, Kira says, you're Marritza. Gul Darhe'el died 6 years ago. No way, Marritza was a good-for-nothing who cowered under his bunk and wept like a woman. Every night he covered his ears because he couldn't bear to hear the screaming for mercy by the Bajorans. And then Marritza starts to cry. Well, as much as he can cry under all that makeup. Kira's eyes narrow a bit as he sits down. He says, "You have no idea what it was like to be a coward in the middle of this, to hear the screams and see the horrors and just do nothing. Marritza is dead. He deserves to be dead."
Wow, that is just some crazy dialogue. That's a brilliant line. You have no idea what it's like to be a coward. That's an incredible thing to say to Kira. Someone who's the very definition of bravery, who's spent her whole life fighting. I think that would really sort of put the point home to her of what he is.
Right.
I mean, he's still guilty as all hell, but
he was still there.
Yeah.
Well, she opens the shield of the cell and says, "I'm letting you go. You didn't commit the crimes and you couldn't stop them. You were only one man. Don't you see I have to be punished? We all have to be punished, Major. You have to go out and tell them I'm Gul Darhe'el." She asks why he's doing this, and he says, "Cardassia will only survive if we admit the truth. My trial will force Cardassia to acknowledge its guilt. We're guilty, all of us. My death is necessary." But Kira says, "What you're asking is for another murder. Enough good people have already died. I won't help kill another."
I mean, what's fascinating there is he says he isn't brave, but he's prepared to put himself on the line to force Cardassia to confront what they did. I mean, that's pretty brave.
Yeah, but it comes quite a while later. He has lived his whole life, and essentially, the way I always view it is, sure, you can get these people, way later, but the thing already happened. Is it really justice? All these, like he said earlier, all these people are already dead. Is it really going to make any difference?
Yes, it will.
It's awful. Kira and Marritza walk out of security with Odo behind them. She says they're sending him back to Korra too, but he says there's nothing there for him. If they believed I was Gul Darhe'el, then my trial may have helped bring forth a new Cardassia. Now you've told them I was just a file clerk. Kira says what you tried to do is honorable, and if Cardassia is going to change, it needs people like you. And they're just kind of casually walking down the promenade when the drunk from earlier comes running out of Quarks with a knife and stabs Marritza in the back. He goes down. Kira shouts at him, "Why? He wasn't Darhe'el." And the killer says, "He was a Cardassian. That's reason enough." "No," Kira says, "it's not." And then a group kind of forms around them. Nobody calls the doctor. It just ends.
And if you notice, Morn is in the crowd.
I did not notice, but okay. I wondered where Morn was in this episode, so I'm
if
glad
there's a
you
crowd,
pointed it out.
Morn's going to be in it.
Especially on the promenade.
Yep. That final scene was kind of annoying, because if you watch Odo following him out from behind, Odo is actually watching the crowd. Odo is acting like a security guy. He's looking around. He's like a few paces behind the guy. He's keeping his eye on things. And then when they get to the bar, Odo's like parallel with them. He's nowhere to be seen. I mean, at least they could have done that scene better. Have the drunk guy's friend cause a distraction, distract Odo, do something like that. It just seemed kind of clunky after everything that they've done. I mean, the guy needed to die. I mean, I see why it had to happen for the story. But that, I thought, was just kind of annoyingly contrived when they could have done a better job.
Yeah, and it was another example of that thing that I said earlier where time just seems to move at a different speed on the station.
Yeah.
Because Odo could easily have just used his shape-shifting ability to knock the guy over, and he didn't. He didn't do anything.
People have thrown stuff at Odo, and he shifted instantaneously, so it passed through him.
Yeah. Not great the way it happened. It, as part of the story, it needed to happen. Yes, but they could have done it better.
Yeah, it needed to happen because the guy who killed him didn't see him as any particular kind of criminal. He just saw him as he was a Cardassian. They deserved to die, which is hard to disagree with considering what they did to the planet.
It also parallels what Marritza was saying about Bajorans.
Well, it's kind of understandable.
Yeah. Well, I'm tired. That was a lot of describing that I needed to do to get through that episode. And it was mostly just talking. It wasn't, things that were happening. There was just so much dialogue. Just an incredible amount of dialogue.
Well, that was quite an episode. I mean, that needed some really good acting talent to pull that off and make it not just appear cheesy.
Well, do you have some over-analysis to offer here?
There's a lot of analysis we could do on this one. I mean, the parallels with the real world are right in your face, are very obvious. Of course. I mean, this is Nuremberg, war criminals. There's the issue of when do you bring them to justice? I'm of the opinion of it doesn't really matter about the age, bring them to justice. That's my take on it.
And also regardless of the job they did there.
Yeah, yes, exactly. You were supporting the effort, therefore, how can you say you're innocent? And I thought that was slightly odd in the episode, but again, it needed to be a storytelling thing. The other takeaway is that the Cardassians clearly have a revisionist history of events on Bajor, or they simply have just lied about it the entire time. This, again, is a parallel to the real world where I know Korea and China have issues with the Japanese version of the events of World War II, because there's questions over revisionism in Japan. There's also revisionism in our world of major American events and events that happened in World War II. You can see this is a very real world episode that can translate directly into Deep Space Nine. I think it also gives us a great insight into the direction that we're starting to see them building the Cardassians and what they think like and how they react. And we get to see that the Cardassians are very much a nationalistic, totalitarian regime. It's for Cardassia. It's for the Cardassian Empire. We see that repeated twice.
Right. So do you think that the Cardassians were purely created as a parallel to the Nazis?
I think so, because you want an enemy that you really can't redeem to a large extent. That would be the Nazis.
And these guys qualify for that.
Yeah, you can separate the Cardassian people from the Cardassian Empire to an extent. So you can have characters who are sympathetic, who you can actually like. But the Empire itself, you create an empire that's basically unlikable. It's very hard.
I was surprised that Kira in the end was very much, hey, you're a good guy. You're just a filing clerk. One person couldn't have done anything. I was really surprised by that because I think she must have felt that she was just one person, but she had an impact. At least she thought she had an impact on the occupation. I don't know. I'm not sure that I buy her just in the end. Oh, you know what? You're fine. That's okay. We'll send you back to Cardassia.
Yeah, that is a little difficult to follow there. Maybe she admired what he was trying to do, in that he wanted to force the Cardassians to deal with something that they just papered over.
Yeah.
But I'd still think she would probably want maybe put him on trial as Marritza.
Sure, for what he actually did.
Yeah.
And let someone else be the judge. Instead, she just goes, oh no, I'm just going to let you go.
Plus, here's the historian in me. I'm also thinking, if he was such a great filing clerk, he probably would have a very good memory of events and records and things that happened during the occupation, which would form an important record for the Bajorans to either find Cardassian war criminals or just document their own history.
I also found it confusing that they said he started taking that medication 5 years ago when he got to this planet, Cora 2. Does that mean that he's looked like Gul Darhe'el ever since he's been on that planet?
That's the impression I got, that he's looked like Gul Darhe'el for a long time.
So was he teaching as Gul Darhe'el?
No, I assume he's teaching just as a Cardassian. It didn't say that was a Cardassian world that he was teaching on.
Cora 2?
Yeah.
But it was a military academy. You think it was not a Cardassian military academy? Of course it was.
They didn't spell that out, though.
Well, Memory Alpha does say that Cora 2 is a Cardassian planet, but its only reference is in this episode.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that kind of shoots some of the aspects of the story down.
Well, it says, according to Star Trek star charts, Cora was identified as a Cardassian system.
Huh. Okay. That seems kind of odd.
Because then it's strange, right? Because then, did he look like Gul Darhe'el while he was there? Because Ducat said that half of Cardassian knew what he looked like. So why would they think that then he was a teacher?
Right.
So, yeah, I did find that detail a little bit shaky. I think they could have tied that one up with a bow a little bit better.
Yeah. Actually said it was on a different planet. You know, for a different culture.
Yeah. But besides that, I mean, I can let that go. That may have even got goofed up in editing. Who knows, with different parts being cut out.
And my final analysis is, considering there is a lot of animus towards Cardassians, how does Garrick survive on that station? I mean, this guy stabbed him from the bar just because he was a Cardassian.
Right.
So you think Garrick would have real trouble just trying to operate normally on the station?
Well, we just finished episode 18 of season 1, and we've only seen Garrick one time.
That's true.
So going this far into the show, I can't say much about him because really, we've barely seen him.
Yes.
So is there any other analysis?
It was another growth episode for Kira.
Yeah.
It showed that she was getting beyond her kill all Cardassians phase, but I think we knew that by now already.
Yeah.
It also showed some of the damage that you'd mentioned before of her from the war. And there are things for her that have a significant impact on her ability to function because they were horrendous for her. And I like seeing that because it does actually tie to your point that you made earlier.
That she was damaged.
That there was damage there that she couldn't recover from because it's not recoverable.
Right. Yeah, I was actually pretty proud of her. I thought she held herself together pretty well in this episode, which I guess shows some growth from the beginning. I mean, we talked about that a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
So I think that was a positive. Like I said, I don't understand her quick turn there at the end. But yeah, overall, it was a pretty good episode for her.
I think that quick turn at the end, some of that might be down to maybe she was just fed up with killing. I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, maybe he brought up the fact that how many people have you killed? And I still consider that Kira knows exactly how many people she killed. She knows the body count.
This was such a talking episode. You know, nothing really happened. We just kind of had this guy come in and he and Kira talked and then he left and he got stabbed. And you know what I mean? That's just sort of all the things that happened. But it brought out this whole story that we really have only been hinting at through all of the other episodes of these atrocities that were committed by the Cardassians against the Bajorans.
Yeah.
And Kira saw them. It's not as if it's something she just made up or read in a book or, you know, someone told her. It's something that she actually saw and was a part of, and so it meant something to her.
Yes, living witness.
This was just such a serious episode, and it was, you know, written really well in terms of what they did with Marritza and the way that he was kind of trying to hide himself and let Kira discover who he was, even though that was the true deception. I mean, overall, this was a really well done episode. We developed Kira a little bit more. We probably didn't really develop anybody else, but they paid it, I would say, the respect that the story needed by keeping, you know, there wasn't a B story with Jake and Nog or some silly thing going on. There was only that one little bad joke by Quark.
Which would have worked if they moved the situation that it was put in. Odo got a drink for Kira from the bar, and Quark not wanting to understand the big picture and saying, oh, did they gamble? Right.
Yeah, if it was like some little thing that he and Morn were up to or whatever, it would have been fine.
I think the quality of this episode speaks to the fact that I haven't seen this in a long time, and I remember everything about it.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else in overanalysis, or should we move to women in the future?
We can move along.
Well, I've already talked about Kira quite a bit. Obviously, she's 50% of this episode, if not a little bit more.
Yeah.
At this point, I appreciate anything that we do with Kira. What I like is that she's no longer just flying off the handle about stuff. I was sure from the beginning of this episode that we were going to see some of the stuff that she was doing earlier where, you know, she would just get really angry and she had that trigger temper.
And she'd just shoot the Cardassian.
Yeah, exactly. I was sure we were going to see that, but we didn't. So I think that's great. I think we continue to expand her character, and obviously the actress just continues to be tremendous. She was really good here, and overall, very good.
Now, what do you think of the trust between her and Sisko? You said earlier that it seemed like Sisko didn't trust her.
Hopefully he learned a bit here that she is trustworthy in this particular thing, which is easily the most emotional thing, the thing that she is tied to probably tighter than anything other than the Kai.
Yeah.
She held it together. She was objective. Yeah, she wanted to believe that he was guilty. She wanted to believe that he was the general.
Right.
But ultimately, she believed the evidence. She believed Odo, and she did the right thing. Of course, I'm not sure it's the right thing to let him go, but let's say she accepted the truth.
Yes.
And so I hope that he continues to trust her. I think it has been difficult for him up until now, but she made a plea and she did what she said she was going to do. So he should continue to trust her. I can't imagine a more volatile situation or a more emotional situation, I think this was maybe the biggest test that we could have had for her.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it for Women in the Future and Overanalysis. So let's move on to your rating. I don't know that I need to ask, but thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral?
Absolute thumbs up. I couldn't see how you would give this episode anything other than a thumbs up.
Yeah.
There are flashes of what makes this show great, and this is one of them.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how you could say anything other than thumbs up. Just that sort of kind of goofy stuff at the ending and maybe a few questions about the timing with the way that his face looked.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, this was a pretty great episode.
Yeah, you could have just tightened it up a little, but every show you can nitpick, and I feel it's, almost nitpicking. I'm
just so impressed yet again with another fantastic guest star. That guy was amazing. When he was going into that first rant where he started to admit that he was Gul Darhe'el, even though that was the lie. But when he started into that was...
They were covered in blood, but they were clean.
Oh my God. Yeah, he was really good, really convincing. And he creeped me out the entire episode, which is sort of what he was trying to do.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, here's the shocking news. Only one episode left in this season. And then after that, we will do a season wrap-up episode and go through our mailbag and read some of the great emails that we've been getting. Then we will move to season 2, I guess. There's still a long ways to go in this show.
Yes.
All right. Well, in the meantime, if you'd like to tell us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, please email us at rebingeit@gmail.com. or tweet at us at Rebingeit. Also, check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave feedback for us there, too. And you can also listen to all of our other awesome podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.